Hey, Ronin Man here. Today we're going to talk about double standards and also about societal standards of decency. In the old days, when somebody passed away, it was a very sensitive time, and at the funeral, any of the speeches afterwards, anything that was written about the person was very like if you read an obituary, if you go and read any obituary, they're going to say good things about the person, or at least bland things about the person. This is kind of a tradition that humanity has had. It's the one time when nobody says, you know what I mean? Like when you're getting married, there's that moment where they say, if anybody, has anything to say, you have the right now to say it, or forever hold your peace kind of thing. But nobody ever does, but they could if they wanted to, right? Marriage, you still have the right to say something, right? Just before somebody gets married. But after death, I mean, the guy, whoever it is, the woman, the man, they've passed away. It's a time to show respect. But what I've found recently is really a big change by the feminist movement is to be very disrespectful at the moment of death. And this is something that I've seen it with many different artists. I can't remember who it was. Oh gosh, Paul Simon's third wife died. I can't even remember her name right now, but there was and I put it on the Ronin Man Twitter channel, but he was attacked by several feminists. And this is like a common thing now. It's like I'm seeing this all the time now, and I never saw this before. And you never see men doing this. This is a feminist thing. You're seeing a lot of hatred. You're seeing a lot of rewriting. You're seeing even speculation. So things that aren't like proven or facts or anything. It's one thing, for example, if somebody had, like a skeleton in the closet, and they said, "I just want to separate these in like levels of importance, right? Priorities." So if somebody, they murdered somebody. O.J. Simpson, let's say, for example, if you think he did, or there was evidence that came out after his death that he did murder Nicole Brown, if that came out, then there would be a certain level of, what do you call it? Like breaking human tradition. If you said, stood up at his funeral and said he was a murderer, and then, it could get worse and worse, right? You could go up and piss on his grave, right? Piss on his casket, right? People have no limit to how far they can go as far as being disrespectful, right? There's no limit. But traditionally, you don't do that, even if you find out facts about somebody. But then there's another level when there are no facts, and you're just speculating after they die. That's like way worse, because you don't even know what happened. You're just guessing, right? You're just kind of throwing around negative things about somebody who just passed away, right? So I consider that to be much worse because it's not based on any fact, right? It's just like, if you're going to speculate about somebody, it's better to do it. Personally, I think, why not do it while they're alive, right? Why not? The only reason why you wouldn't do it is if you're using their death in order to make money by speculating on things that aren't, there's no facts about. So that would be a pretty low level thing, because when you're writing for a paper like the Town Hall, you're relying on advertising and clicks. So you're trying to make money, right? You're trying to make money. So in this case, Christine is making money off of Hugh Hefner's death with kind of speculation and also a total lack of what do you call it? I don't know, like facts. Let's get into it. Okay, so here we go. It's pretty gross. So the word gross is kind of weird for me. Like in a business article, it just doesn't seem like something that, this is a political magazine. Gross. I mean, is gross illegal? If we're talking about, is it legal, illegal? Is it bad manners? And we've already talked about the bad manners of talking about somebody after they die, speculating on their, something, but it's just a weird word. To me, it's just, it tells you right away that there's no real facts. You know what I mean? Like, because if in other words, if Hugh Hefner did something, right? Let's say that he was the cause of Marilyn Monroe's death, and there was proof, whether he did it or he said something that caused her to go into a tailspin. If something like that happened, you wouldn't say gross, because that's like new facts everybody wants to read, right? Gross isn't one of these words that you get thrown around and tends to get thrown on guys more than girls. And again, we're using the picture here to make money. Marilyn's picture, right? Okay. So there was an article about written by Sarah Patzel, right? New Wave, pro-feminist, pro-life feminist group, New Wave Feminists. Okay. So now I'll just tell you this real quick. Okay. So Hefner purchased nude photos from Marilyn Monroe early in her career, right? He purchased the rights to photographs, and he used those photographs in his first issue of Playboy. Okay, that's how he got started, right? He purchased nude pictures of Marilyn legally, and she sold them to him, right? Her, whoever did it at that time, nowadays you do it online. I'm sure it was her publicist. Or in this case, it sounds like he might have bought them from somebody else who bought them. So she sold them to a calendar, and then he bought them from the calendar. I don't have the exact stats, but basically he purchased legally. There's no evidence that he didn't. He purchased the rights to her pictures, right? She took some pictures. Okay, now again, nude pictures in the 1950s, right, are a big deal, and especially somebody like Marilyn Monroe. So if you sell nude pictures of yourself and you sell the rights, okay, you're basically screwed no matter what happens. There's no amount of sympathy that anybody can have for you because you sold the rights, right? I have a good friend. He sold a book. He sold the rights. He was having trouble in his life. Things were not going well for him, and he sold the rights for $5,000 to the best-selling book on Amazon in his niche. And he regrets it to this day because the book is still a bestseller. And he lost the rights for only $5,000, and he wasn't doing very well in his life. And I've always felt some sympathy for him because that sucks, because he sold it and then later regretted it. And I can understand why Marilyn would regret it. Like you sell nude pictures to make money and then you regret it. I mean, it's very understandable, and I can sympathize with her as a human being, that she, like really, seriously, I can sympathize with her because I do things and then later on you're in a new career or you're a new time in your life, and you don't really want the old things to come up because they're not related or, for whatever reason. In this case, it was nude pictures, so pretty obvious why she didn't want them out there, especially, back in the 1950s, when it was a bigger deal. So I guess she made one mistake was selling her pictures. No, I'd say three mistakes. One is taking nude pictures. This was not a common thing in the 1950s. This was a very, very uncommon thing. So don't, in your mind, if you're young and you're, nowadays people have pictures, they're shared. Even in high school, you have people sharing pictures and nude pictures of each other. There's revenge porn. There's all this kind of stuff. In the old days, this didn't happen so easily. It wasn't like, oops, my boyfriend posted a picture. I posted a picture on Facebook. No. You took nude pictures. You had to go to a special nude photographer. He couldn't send them to Kodak. He had to develop them he had to be a professional. It was a big deal. Nude pictures was a very big deal. In fact, nude pictures, even in Japan, when I took some nude pictures in Japan back in, it was probably about 95, there was no place I could develop them because they're considered obscene if they're nude. So I had to find like a Yakuza. I had to find like a Japanese mafia backed photo lab, and I brought them there and they developed them, no problem, right? But it wasn't easy. So back in the 50s, of course, it was fucking really hard, right? So when she did pictures, don't think for a minute that this happened on a moment's notice. She thought about it. She had a publicist. She had several people around her advising her, and she decided to take pictures, nude pictures, and sell the rights, right? So that's what she did, right or wrong. But I think she made two mistakes. So one was taking nude pictures. Two was selling the rights. And the third one was it was just a bad business decision because she was quite in demand. She sold them for a very small amount of money because Hugh Hefner bought them for $500. Okay, so he bought them secondhand for $500, so she must have sold them for even less, right? And so she obviously wasn't such a great, she was not an Elon Musk or a business, a very wise business mind. So in that sense, I can also sympathize with her. Not because none of us are perfect, right? And sometimes we don't see the value in ourselves. I think a lot of MGTOWs listening to this, you may greatly underestimate what you have to offer the world and not realize that you have so much to offer. You have so much to offer people, whatever it is, in business, in friendships, if you want women, in art, and whatever it is that, often we really, really, really underestimate ourselves, especially as guys. I think it kind of the opposite tends to go with girls, where they might think they're great, but it doesn't really pan out, right? And then you start to see the reality later in life. But there's just a bigger problem with guys, is not realizing that they're smart, or they're good, or they're capable, and they have to, and we slowly come to grips with this kind of stuff, right? So either way, she sold him, and then she committed suicide later. And here's the article. So basically that tells the story. When she was 16, she did this and blah, blah, blah. She sold nude. Yeah, they sold him for $500. And he never, and so Marilyn Monroe, so she said, I never even received a thank you from all those who made millions off a nude Marilyn photograph. I even had to buy a copy of the magazine to see myself in it, right? Now, this is a common thing. Once you sell the rights to something, okay, you not only lose the any control that you had over it. So as far as which magazine it goes in, or how it's edited, or what advertisement is next to it, but you lose control of everything. So you're not even, no one calls you because you're in the way, right? You've sold it. It's a commodity now. It's a commodity on the market. So it's actually, I never received a thank you. This is a normal thing, actually. When you sell a picture, okay, you don't receive a thank you. It's like you sold it. And I just have to say here, when it comes to business, is your job as a business person, you want to make money, is to find something that doesn't have a lot of value to somebody else, and then to bring it or change it or alter it or bring it to a new place where it has higher value. And that's, you're making, you make a profit on that. That's how business is done, right? So somebody bought her pictures for $500 and they made millions of dollars, right? Pretty common story in business. This is what we consider genius. This is what we consider Hefner is a genius. He's a marketing genius and he's also a business genius, right? He bought something for $500 and he made millions of dollars. And he made an empire really off that, because her first magazine was the beginning of his whole empire, right? So it's the same thing with, if you look at the guy, I forget his name, but the guy who started GoPro, the camera. That company is a very interesting story actually behind it. He went to a fair, in the Guangdong Fair, Canton Fair in southern China, and he found a camera that was a really high quality, small, versatile, tough camera. And then he bought it, and then he put a plastic case around it, and he turned it into a quote unquote sports camera, right? So he took a cheap camera, right, in China, cheap price, right? But it was high quality, but it didn't really have a purpose. It didn't have any marketing. There was no pizzazz. It was just a cheap camera sitting on a shelf. And then he took it and he fixed it up. He put a case around it. He started to make all kinds of accessories to go with it. And then he started to make sports videos, jumping out of airplanes, riding bikes down the thing. You've all seen the surfing pictures. All the marketing that GoPro did is absolutely fucking genius, right? Now, he bought a very cheap Chinese camera and he turned it into himself into a billionaire, right? A normal guy like me and you. He saw the camera. He could see that it had different uses. He, paid whatever, $2 or $1 to get a plastic case made for it. And he remarketed it as a sports camera. Now, naturally, the Chinese manufacturer that made that camera, in the beginning, they were very happy because they sold a lot of cameras. But once they realized what was going on, they were angry because the guy was making so much money off their camera, right? It's like he was turning himself into a billionaire, and here they are pumping out these cameras and making whatever it was, 15% profit, right? So, which is, pretty common to have low profit on factories in China. So they were very upset. So whenever whenever somebody turns your product or your, picture or whatever into a lot of money, it's normal to have jealousy, envy, jealousy, humiliation, because you couldn't see it yourself. It's a common, it's a difficult struggle. Okay. Like if you sold a paper, you wrote a paper tomorrow and you sold it, and then I bought it and turned it into like $100 million, you'd be like, this is not fair. But actually, in the world of copyright, it is fair. And it's a rule that everybody lives by. And so this is what gets me on this whole article, is that I understand that I totally understand, and if these stories didn't convince you, that her feelings about it, that she was like, of course, they made tons of money off her pictures. She's not going to be so stoked about that. And also she lost total control, so they got published everywhere. So everybody got to see her naked body, which she didn't have to sell at that point because she was making a lot of money just being in movies. She didn't have to do nude pictures anymore. So I guess if there's any kind of advice, I would say what this article should be saying, it should be saying a warning to young girls is to be very, very careful about taking nude pictures and about selling them, because once you sell the rights, you lose total control. So I was going to get my friend who's a professional photographer on this episode, but I just don't think it's necessary. Everybody understands this. This is copyright, right? This is, you own something if you buy it, right? So if we're going to start saying that when men sell anything that's copyrighted, nobody writes an article about us if we regret it, right? Nobody wrote an article about that Chinese camera company. I just know the story because I lived in China, and I was very interested in how somebody could turn a camera from one of those trade shows, which I went to a lot of them, and turn that into $1 billion. That was an amazing, amazing story, because it's a very simple story that I could have done. So I was like, oh man, the guy's smart, So I looked into it further and I figured out the whole story. But so basically, yeah, this is the deal. But see, none of this is written here. None of this, they don't talk about this. And all they talk about is the fact that now he's buying a tomb, and he's going to buy a tomb. He bought a tomb and he's getting buried next to Marilyn Monroe, right? So basically he bought her pictures. Okay. He was a genius, right? He bought them, obviously, whether you like or don't like the pictures, or don't like his magazine, or don't like Marilyn Monroe, whatever the reason, whatever your personal views are, if you buy anything for $500 and turn it into millions of dollars back in the 1950s, you are a good business person, right? There's no doubt about it, especially if you do it legally, above board, and then you're very smart. So Hefner was very smart. She was not so smart. She was not a good business person. She sold it cheap. She was good at a lot of other things, though. She was good at marketing herself and getting out there, and she did a great job, and she became somebody that we're talking about today. So, I don't want to put, she was more famous than him. So, she did a great job at many things in her life, but this whole picture thing is really overwrought. And the thing is this, Christine she knows better, right? And Sarah Patzel, she knows copyright law. But this is what happens now, is that basically women sell nude pictures without thinking about it, okay? And then when they become famous, they regret it, and they try to shame, they try to force, they try to sue, all kinds of things to stop those pictures from being available, because they want total control of their image. The thing is if you want total control, don't sell the copyrights of anything. And that's what should be at least mentioned in this article, is everything Hefner did is legal. She agreed to it. He paid the money. He followed through with everything he said he was going to do. And then he did a great job of marketing it, right? And what I think, if I was Marilyn Monroe, I would have gone to Hefner myself, and I would have said, look, I'm really impressed with what you did. Obviously, I'm not so happy about it because I didn't make the money. But let's talk about doing something together. And I can almost guarantee that he would have been like, interesting. Okay. What do you propose? And they would be talking about something, but she didn't do that. She was just trying to stop him. Didn't work. He moved on. Now he's passed away, and people are writing these articles, but I just want some reality here. let's talk about copyright law. If you're going to talk about pictures that were purchased legally, you have to talk about copyright law. You have to talk about the realities. If you sell a picture, you don't own it. I don't know what else I need to say. Like this is what happens is when you're a man and you sell something, nobody cares. There's no articles about you. It's like, you dumb fuck, you sold it, you idiot, right? You sold it. But when it comes to women, it's totally different. It's like the poor girl, she, this and that. And I think this article, I'm going to put it below, but I think they almost try to say, there's a hint here, as they saw her as a piece of meat, sold for pleasure of others, despicable, gross, utterly disgraceful, basically saying, that Hefner and guys like him were the cause of her death. They were the cause of her suicide. That's basically what this article, if you read this article through the lines, that's what she's saying here. And I just think that's the part that I think is really like, it is so disgraceful, really. After a man passes away, okay, there's no proof of any of this, right? There's no proof that she committed suicide because of Hefner. In fact, no one's even ever said this. And this article doesn't say it directly because they know it's ridiculous, right? Let's go to the Wikipedia page. She died in 1962, August 5th, right, of a barbiturate overdose. She was a sex symbol, popular. Now that's another thing, sex symbol. She was a sex symbol. Why was she a sex symbol? Partly because of the movies, but let's face it, the nude pictures didn't hurt her image, okay, as a sex symbol, right? The only nude pictures was from Hef, and Hef did a great job getting them out there. So in some ways, you could say that, maybe she didn't want to go down that road or whatever, but sex symbol, nude pictures, 1950s, this was connected, right? So part of her popularity was that. And in fact, if you look at Japan, for example, it's very common, like Ijima Ai, she was a famous, porn star, but then she got into the news, she got into like variety shows and everything, and she ended up also dying, similar. It was really another mysterious kind of thing, but she passed away, and there's a lot of conspiracy stories about her death. I actually ran into her once. I ran into her in Harajuku, just walking down the street. I smiled, and then she smiled. She was nice. Yeah, I kind of liked her, actually, Ijima Ai. But either way, she where was I going with that? Oh yeah, she was a sex symbol, and she was a porn star who took that skill and then became a non-porn star. Became a common media popular person, because a lot of guys watch these kind of shows and they imagine of what she looks like nude, right? They'll go watch her porn, and then they'll watch her on the variety show, right? And this is a common thing now. It's a really, really common. I forget the name of the number one. Her parents are, I think, from Lebanon. The porn star. She's not in porn anymore, but she got her start in porn, and now she's doing other stuff, right? It's a pretty common thing, actually. So, I mean, to say that he caused her suicide, I mean, he might have even caused a lot of her fame, really, getting those nude pictures out there. If those nude pictures, no one can go back in time, but if there was no nude pictures, would she have been such a big sex symbol? And would she have been so in demand? Don't know, right? Hard to say. I definitely noticed those pictures when I was growing up. I was like, that was sex and nude pictures have something in common, right? I was like, ooh, Marilyn Monroe. Okay, so the time of her death, she suffered from mental illness and substance abuse for many years, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I don't want to go into it. I actually liked Marilyn Monroe, but I mean, the idea that the kind of insinuation at Hugh Hefner's death that him and guys like him, and now he's like relentlessly pursuing her in death by having a grave next to her, like it's a forever black mark on him and on every man. This is the kind of feeling we're getting here. We're getting these stories that show total disrespect for, groundbreaking, brilliant business people, guys, right? And it's only going to get worse. When someone like Donald Trump dies or someone like George Bush dies, you're going to see there's going to be a new level of lack of respect. And it's just kind of going downhill. You'll see more and more of this is my prediction. Whether you like anybody or not, you'll see less respect. And in my own experience, and I can't say this for sure, but I'd like to ask the audience here, you guys, have you seen this happen to women after they die? Have you seen people pile on with insinuations and basically bad talking, right? Bad talking somebody who just passed away. Are we seeing that? I don't know. I see it with men personally. I don't see it with women. I haven't seen that. I'm sure it happened with somebody, but generally I tend to see, and especially successful men. So, like a regular guy, you don't see it so much, but with successful men, you're seeing, basically people that didn't fit into the feminist kind of dialogue. You're seeing this mainly. I think the SJWs and the feminist movements, they will tend to do this, is my kind of take on it. And what do you guys think? Do you guys agree? I just wanted to go a couple other things. One interesting thing, is double standards. Double standards, right? Study finds smiling men are less attractive to women. Okay, and this is Psychology Today, right? So basically, men that smile are not as attractive to women. Okay, and they did a pretty big study of 1,000 people. So it's a decent study. It's not a huge study, but it's a reasonable study, right? Okay, and then when women smile, that's considered attractive by men, right? That's considered a big plus, right? So if women want to attract the opposite sex, they smile, and if you're a man, you don't smile, which is actually good reaction here. And here's an interesting thing there. On the other hand, as co-author Alex Beal told the CBS News, the ratings were gut reactions on carnal sexual attraction. Okay, now what do you guys, if you want to be around a woman, what are you really interested in, right? Or would you say desirable partner or spouse? This guy is separating these two things. This is insanity. Okay, this is insanity right here. Okay, I'm going to tell you how relationships happen. Okay, they start with sex. Okay, in the beginning of a relationship, it's very hot. There's a lot of sex. There's a lot of interest in sex. Over time, that gets less and less. Okay, and you see an old couple, they don't fuck as much as newlyweds, right? Hello, right? So it's not either or. If you want either a wife or to get laid, you would be frowning in your pictures more, looking more brooding and more serious. And that's attractive. But this is just the stupid shit you read now. It's like anybody with half a brain, the woman has to find you sexually attractive first, right? Of course. She could think you're nice and everything else. What the fuck are you going to, this is fucking just more stupid advice. But basically, what I wanted to get in this article is that whenever you see an article about women and they'll say men like smiling women, they don't like non-smiling women, right? Then there's a huge, you just launch into this whole debate about men, patriarchy and ordering women around. But what this study found was that men, although they liked smiling women, they liked brooding women too. Women were much more strict, and they liked the brooding guy, and they did not like the smiling guy. So it's the same thing we saw with short and tall. Women are much more rigid. Guys will choose a sexy woman, big tits, nice ass, long hair, pretty face. We will choose that, but we will also, if you look at statistically, we will totally make do with whatever is available. Women, on the other hand, will not. And guys that are this has been done, many studies of dating sites, is any guy who's under a certain height, and I forget the height, what it is, 5'11" or 5'10", whatever it is, there's a certain height. When under that, like the likes just drop to the floor, right? Whereas women are much more rigid about choosing their physical traits. So until now, you've been screamed at by women is like, you just care about this. But now that the stats are out, because we have online sites, women are worse. Like, they're more hardcore. So women are not going to choose a guy who's smiling too much, and they're not going to choose a short guy. Period. Right? So like this whole discussion, and that's not talked about. Of course, it's not talked about. Right? Okay. Last thing here is There's this taxi driver in Japan, and it reminded me when taxis first. Okay, taxi drivers were all male when I moved to Japan. Okay, you would see the very, very rare female taxi driver. And I mean extremely rare. Basically, there was none. Okay? And it's a big industry in Japan, right? And so what happened was, I don't remember the year. Let's just kind of throw out a number here and say 2002, somewhere around that time. The women started saying that they wanted to drive taxis, right? And the men were like, it's too dangerous. You can't do it. They were not for it. But finally they relented and they said, okay, you can drive taxis, right? And so they started giving taxi licenses and everything to the women. Well, what happened after that was this perfect example of double standards. Just like you sell your pictures as a guy and then you can't get them back and you're an idiot, you're disparaged for being an idiot for selling your valuable pictures. And a woman does the same thing, and then she's sympathized with, and the guy who bought them is demonized, right? Because he bought them and he didn't give them away for free, like he's supposed to, or take them down or whatever. He's in deluded minds. But so when women actually got the right to drive taxis, then they realized something that was everybody knew, is that Japanese taxi drivers had 24-hour shifts. That's the way they always did it. Japanese did it. I forget, it was 3 days a week or 4 days a week, but there was like either 3 or 4 days a week, Japanese taxi drivers drove cabs 24 hours a day. The reason why they did that is because certain times a day in Tokyo are much better than others, right? So if you drive at a rush hour or certain holidays, there was a big difference. So in order to make that even out, what they said is, okay, guys, 24-hour shifts. So you drive 24 hours, you get the good times, you get the bad times, you get it all. And male taxi drivers were like, okay, that's it. So you also saw with that, you saw a lot of crystal meth. One of the very few professions in Japan that has a kind of a traditional drug problem would be the driving profession. And that's because of rules like this, where they drove 24 hours a day. That was the way they did it. And then they had a day off. I think it's very depressing and miserable, but either way, guys just sucked it up and did it. You never even heard anything about it. You would go get a taxi in the 1980s in Japan. The guy'd be smiling with his white gloves on, and he would take you perfectly to where you wanted to go without a hassle, right? You never knew the guy had been up for 24 fucking hours, right? And that's what his whole life is like: sleeping in the car, running the air conditioner, smoking, just to try to stay awake with the nicotine, and then it also was drug abuse, right? Because they couldn't stay awake, right? What happened when women started driving? Well, as soon as they got the right, it was kind of funny. I can't find an article about it because I read it back in the day and I remember this happening, this shift. But in Japan, old stuff, I probably read a Japanese article. I can't find it anymore. But either way, so what happened was women got the right to drive taxis, but then they said, holy fuck, 24 hours, I can't do this. This is not right. This is inhuman, right? So the males were like, this is what the fucking deal is. You drive 24 like we do, Women pushed, and guess what happened? They got the juicy shifts. That's what happened in the end. Women drive 8 hours in the daytime, and they get the juiciest shift when there's the most money. And guys suck it up even fucking worse in Japan now. They drive in the shittiest times, all night, the least amount of traffic, and women get the juicy shifts. That's the way it is. And there could be argument that it makes sense. I mean, at nighttime, you get more drunk guys. You get more, alcoholics. You get problems. You get fights, right? Women have trouble dealing with a man being aggressive drunk, right? Everybody has a problem, but women have more problems, right? On average. You're going to have your MMA fighters that are women. God bless them, 100%, right? They'll kick my ass. But I'm talking about the average woman, the average taxi driver doesn't get into it because they're a great fighter. They actually get into it because they lost their job, or there's some reason why they have to work off hours, and they don't have many options, so they choose taxi driving, right? So women basically took the best things, and nobody really did fuck all about it. Guys got an even worse deal in Japan now driving taxis. Now with Uber, it's getting even worse. Guys are just getting crunched. But here's a funny article. Just end on this one so there's this girl and Ikuta Kana, right? And she basically is supposed to be the prettiest driver in Japan. And the first thing I noticed is by Japanese standard, they definitely would not consider her pretty. So it's kind of an odd thing. It's like, why are they saying that? Kind of boyish and stuff, kind of, which is cool. I mean, I like the way she looks fine, but definitely not, prettiest. It's kind of odd. Well, the reason why they say that is because she was a model, and she was a gravure model. So gravure model is basically, if you don't know this, when you're in your teens, okay, say anywhere from 13 to say 23 in Japan, there's a niche called gravure model, and I actually dated one of the most famous ones, and she was awesome. But the thing is they basically are famous for having tits and ass. That's basically it's softcore. It's not hardcore. There's no hardcore. Just like they wear bikinis, they prance around. Sometimes they jump around. If you search gravure, Gravure model, you'll see a lot of different what I'm talking about there. So she was that type of model. She had a fan base, and then she started driving a taxi. But like all this stuff is stuff that it's just so. It's totally cool. It's awesome. Like it's kind of like if David Beckham drove a car or something, a taxi. But it definitely is unfair to guys. Like guys just don't have this. Like her Instagram is gonna blow up. She's gonna have bazillion hits. She's gonna get tons of people waiting in line to drive her taxi because she's famous, right? Japanese, and this is one thing any rock star who went to Japan will tell you is that Japanese fans are the finest in the world. They're the most loyal fans ever. And, John, who was on this podcast a lot, his wife, he's a porn star, and I can tell you directly, they're the best fans. They're the most loyal, the most gifts, the most respectful, everything. They're awesome, right? They really support you, right? Having a fan base in Japan is a really good thing, right? So she's got this fan base, and she's milking it, and here she is smiling. She's happy, right? She can still model. She can drive a taxi, right? She can do it all, right? Good times for her. Right. And I'm sure she drives only in the daytime, right? Only in the daytime. Meanwhile, guys, suck it up, drive the most, even now, like shittier behind her. You should have a guy like hanging himself there, behind his taxi, because guys just get a worse and worse deal. And the world turns, right? The world turns, So part of this, I say this in jest because part of this can't be helped. I understand the dynamics that are going on with this girl here perfectly, and I have nothing wrong with it. It's just like I said, if David Beckham decided to go drive a taxi in London, women are going to wait in line to take his taxi, and he's going to make a lot more than the average taxi. And here's one last funny story about David Beckham. He stayed at this hotel in Odaiba in Tokyo, right? Back in the day, right? And so he stayed in one particular hotel room. That hotel room became famous. I can't remember why. Maybe he did a photo shoot or he took a picture off his balcony or whatever, but all the Japanese girls knew that was his hotel room. So even to this day, that one room in the hotel is always booked. And some reporters went outside the door and they waited for somebody to check out. And then the girl came and she was alone. And then they said, it was all in Japanese, so I watched it. It was hilarious. And they said, so what did you, why did you rent this room? Like of all the rooms, why this room? She's like, well, David Beckham stayed here, and they're like, oh, okay. And it was a female reporter. She's like, well, like, what do you do like in David Beckham's room? And she's like, I licked the toilet. This is how good fans in Japan are. They're willing to lick the toilet that you used, fucking like a year ago or 2 years ago, right? And, I'm sure she was, whatever she was doing on top of that. But, these are the Japanese fans. So it's a hilarious situation. So I understand this girl. I understand the whole double standard. I understand women have this massive, marketable ability as sexual creatures that guys go nuts over. But it's just not talked about. It's just like one of these things that like there's this privilege that guys have. I don't know who has privilege, this girl here or the guy in the taxi behind there. I'm guessing that she has a much better and easier and she makes more money. She has a better schedule, better time slot. She has people who are nicer to her. If we're talking about privilege, double standards, and like again, I'm not butthurt on this. This is totally fine. This is totally cool. I understand it. It's totally cool. I would probably take her taxi. You know what I mean? If I knew she was cruising by, I would not pay any extra, and I would not wait in line. That's for fucking sure. But if I saw her, I'd probably jump in. What the hell, Instead of the same price, talk to her. Anybody who's famous, they've always got something interesting, some interesting stories to talk about, right? Anybody with, I should say, famous people or anybody with an unusual experience in life, they always have, it's always interesting to talk to them, right? So I'd probably jump in there. But I just want to say, guys, hey, show some respect. People pass away, whether it's Marilyn Monroe, whether it's Hugh Hefner, we are being judged based on what we do and say, And I understand it's frustrating, when something happens that's like so disrespectful, which is what we're seeing. But again, in the end, you're only judged by what you do, right? When someone else does something, time catches up to them. People figure it out. They figure out that somebody is showing a lack of class and somebody is, being tasteless. Somebody is being a cad. Someone's being unfair. It all comes out in the wash, right? So just let it roll. Watch this stuff that is happening now. We're seeing a lot of disrespect at funerals, right? At funerals and after death, right? We're going to see more of it. Just keep your eye on this one because there's going to be more. Because now it's like a shark, right? It's a blood in the water, right? You can attack any man after he dies, right? Whether it's innuendos or any kind of BS, right? But I personally am not into it. Either way, Ronin Man sign, I'm going off, eat some food at the Buddhist temple. There's a Buddhist temple in Bangkok, which is freaking awesome. Brown rice, so good. I hope it's still open because they're not open all day. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for the comments, man. Fucking loving your comments, bros. Thank you. Really. They're really good, too. They're like, I'm fucking reading all of them, right? So thanks for watching and thanks for commenting and liking. Have a good one.